It's Wednesday evening. You're listening to Mystic Room Cafe with Wendy Schindler and Travis Short. Every week we will interview guests that are experts in various fields of the supernatural, paranormal, unexplained, and esoteric. So sit back and let us take you on a journey to educate, enlighten, and entertain as we broaden your horizons. Now, here's your hosts, Wendy Schindler and Travis Short.
The Sky Is Fallen from the Lucifer soundtrack. I'm sorry, I can't see the artist name, and it is completely eluding me right now. Travis, how are you doing? Travis?
I'm here. I'm just waiting for death to swoop in and claim me.
Pretty much what it sounds like.
It's been a horrible week. Sound like Wolfman Jack.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway.
I'm doing okay. I got this stupid head cold / chest cold / bronchitis / pneumonia. So, I don't know. I'm making it. I'm surviving.
That's good. Glad to hear that.
I can tell you're thrilled. Thanks for your support.
I'm just glad this is all over the phone, so I don't have to be there with you getting all cooties.
I know, right?
Mm-hmm. I tried to bring our guest on, but it kept giving me some weird and unfortunate message.
Was it doing what
there.
Like that, when we tried to call Nick Redfern that time?
No, it's a little bit different. I mean, it says show, and then it says like all, and I don't know. I don't know why it's doing that.
That's interesting.
I know, right? Yeah, it's not. It's just being very, very odd. I don't know why. Share screen, share system sound, add people to this call, and it's just not wanting to do it.
I wonder why.
I am not knowing. Anyway, well, tell me how your day went, other than you being
just well, yeah, I had my show this morning, so I did an hour of live radio then. And trying to do sales and take care of things. The boss shows up at 3:00 in the afternoon and acts like it's 9:00 and wants to get a whole day's worth of conferences in between 3 excuse me, and 5. I'm sorry, I tried to hit the mute button and I couldn't make it.
Oh, bless you. Oh, okay, maybe I can do it this way. There we go. Add to call. Okay, we're trying to get Cindy on the line. So go ahead and tell me about your day, Travis, some more. Your boss was bugging you.
Hello.
Not bugging me.
Hi there.
How you doing?
Very good.
Good. Very, very glad to hear it. We are live. I got a little mixed up on my openings today because I'm using I'm the one doing the studio today, which is a little different than we have been for the last month or so. And I got a little hyper there at the end.
Well, we're approaching a Mercury retrograde, so if we have any snafus in communication, we can blame that.
Okay.
And we will.
Cindy, this is Travis. And
hi, Travis.
Ill.
Hi, Cindy. How are you? I apologize. I am under the weather right now, so I sound a little bit like Wolfman Jack. Occasionally, I will sound a little bit like Richard Sturban from the Oak Ridge Boys. I just kind of drift back and forth between these two varied voice patterns tonight, so I apologize.
Okay, so not Donald Duck when you pronounce Spreaker.
She's heard my Spreaker comment. I hate saying Spreaker. I sound like a drunk Donald. We're a Spreaker. It doesn't work. I really want to get a hold of them and help them rebrand. They need to be something else.
Yeah, one of my friends wrote to me and said, there was a misspelling. I just wanted to make you aware of it. And
no, there's not.
It's just the way it is. So.
I wish it were. But thank you so much for being on the show with us tonight. And again, I apologize. I've already told Wendy, if I disappear, it's probably because I've muted the microphone and I'm coughing or sneezing or something. So I do apologize. I had to do that throughout the day this morning during my live radio show on the radio station that I manage. I had to mute myself several times during that program just because Wendy said we're live tonight. 2/3 of the show is live. I am just kind of here. By the grace and goodness of NyQuil and DayQuil, am I here? So,
well, if any of us start coughing tomorrow, we could brand a whole new meaning to airborne.
This is true. We could. We very well could. I like your sense of humor. So.
Thank you.
Oh, good.
So
well, we've got people joining us in the chat room, and it looks like they're getting in okay, and sound must be good, and I'm
super
happy. Okay, so this is Mystic Moon Cafe. I've got Travis Short, my co-host, with me, and tonight we are interviewing Casey Tarot and Astrology, Cindy McKean, and we're gonna talk about a whole bunch of different stuff.
Yes, we are.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to kind of out of the gate here, just kind of ask what got you into tarot readings and astrology to begin with.
Well, when I was in university, I I was studying health sciences, and it was pretty intense. And I really sometimes needed to kind of get geared up to really get into the books. And sometimes I would just start reading astrology. And when it came time from decompressing from studying, I would start reading astrology again. I just found it very fascinating that the signs really did tend to correlate to the people I knew, and it really did apply about 80%. So I said, there is something to it, and this is pretty ancient.
Oh, yeah.
So it survived for so long for a reason. And that's how I got into the astrology. With the tarot, it's kind of another facet of the esoteric knowledge. And tarot just offers another layer of being able to use the intuition that we all have in order to tap into the others. So that's how I really got into it. And I was very lucky, too, to have a family that was very open-minded, and they didn't discourage it at all. I mean, they had their own beliefs into the psychic world and the esoteric realm, so that's how I got into it.
Very neat. Now, I had a question, and I don't know. Now, astrology and astronomy, is there a difference? If so, can you tell us what it is?
So astrology is more the study of how the planets affect us on a personal level or on a mundane level.
Okay.
And astronomy is more the study of the positions of the stars and planets more on a scientific level. So usually astronomy does not recognize astrology, but astrology must recognize astronomy.
Okay. And
I mean, one is like a more scientific method of looking at it. I mean, really, it's kind of splitting hairs when it comes to schools of thought.
Mm-hmm. And well, you already said that you tie in your tarot readings with your intuition and through the astrology, and that's very neat. I like that a lot.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah, there's a lot of correspondence between the tarot cards and the astrology, but it tends to get rather muddled up simply because, a lot of this knowledge is, it is tied in. It's esoteric, so it's hidden. It's a little bit, the inner circle type of knowledge. And the other reason is with the true origin of the tarot, it's not really clear either, and it's been through several different cultures. Some say it started in ancient Egypt, others say Mesopotamia, others yet say Italy or France. So it's kind of gone through the tumbler quite a bit, and with that, lost some of the identity and correlations with astrology.
It's very interesting. Now, it says that you, I remember reading on your bio that you had lived all over the world. How has that affected your views and beliefs with the tarot and well, life in general, really?
That's an interesting question because every country and culture has its own background and belief in something beyond the veil. Mm-hmm. So, if we look at places like England, for instance, where they have a little bit of the Druidic knowledge, or you go into the Far East where, a lot of them are it's knowledge based on what they've recorded in events in time, but also a lot of their folklore. What you would find among all the different countries that's common is that a lot more people believe in astrology and tarot and just the psychic realm in general than you would expect. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of times religion tends to interfere. Organized religion tends to get involved and condition people to want to say, "Oh no, this is not really something that we should get into." Quite honestly, with myself, I think it's opened my mind quite a lot, and it's it's been pretty helpful sometimes to have an old reliable buddy, for instance, like astrology, that you know that wherever in the world you go to would remain the same, more or less. So, I mean, we are a world that is full of diversity and many different people. So I think collectively, you have to look at the two hand in hand. I mean, one can't really exist without the other around.
I agree entirely, yeah. It's just, I think a lot of people do believe a lot more than ever will ever admit it, but like I said, they won't admit it because it's different, and the church is kind of always, in my own head, seem to try to take away some of your free will and free thinking and control everything, where this is not controllable. It just is what it is.
It is. You can't stop the sun from coming up in the sky every day, right?
No, you can't. Nope. Not yet, anyway.
No.
Well, one of the things and Wendy and I have had this discussion on here before. My background is rather varied as well, and at one time in another life, in this life, but in another time frame, I was an ordained Southern Baptist minister. And it was always very interesting to me how Judeo-Christianity many times will downplay the true spiritual nature of life. It's much more about encapsulating a religious system than it is actually exploring and recognizing our spiritual nature.
You know, I agree with you on that, and I think a lot of it has to do with what Wendy said, where there is some kind of method of control there.
Yes. Yes. If it can't be controlled, we fear it, and we must stomp it out.
I mean, if the masses had all this information, imagine how, this could change the course of leadership, of elections, of the way, we could expect the economy to work. I think we'd be a lot more awake and alert, and a lot more, using both sides of our brain. So I think if someone was in power, it might be a little bit more to their benefit that people don't know about this.
Well, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So an absolute knowledge is the same way.
Yeah.
Not wisdom, but knowledge.
Yeah, that's true. But what is very interesting is if you do look at the Judeo-Christianic religions and even the Islamic religion, there is mysticism behind it. I mean, there's the Kabbalah with Judaism, and there's the Sufism with Islam. So, I mean, there is a lot of religious belief in it, and I think sometimes it tends to be masked or maybe put into a separate book that gets put on the back shelf there. So, right. And the other interesting thing, and I'm sure you already know this, but that the Vatican has the largest collection of astrological
yes.
books in hand in their library.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. I would love
yes.
to get in there and see it.
Yeah, good luck. They wouldn't even let they wouldn't let Robert Langdon in the Da Vinci Code. So, we can't.
Right, yeah. Let me call up my good buddy, the Pope.
Let's see. Yeah, we already heard the story about the bottle of wine that I opened that was blessed by the Pope. That didn't go well. So, but, now I have to ask this question just as kind of a point of discernment, Cindy.
Absolutely.
Tarot card reading, tea leaf readings, palm readings, those types of things, astrological readings. How do they vary and different? Are they basically the same type of readings? Are they different approaches? I mean, because I've had people that I've represented as a publicist, as a PR, people who claim to be empaths and psychics. I've represented individuals who are astrological sign readers. I have dealt with individuals in the Christian realm who are faith healers and things like that. So when we look at what you do, how does it line up, and where does it fall in that array of gifts and talents?
I think they're all tied into the same source. We all just need to tap into the ethers to get the information. And how you choose to reach it is the difference between the tea leaves, the tarot, palm reading. And, it's kind of like today, I guess the different ways that we could have, we could have been connecting either through the phone or through Skype or through some kind of online VoIP. At the end of the day, it would be your voice and mine connecting and us being able to exchange information that way. So that's how I kind of differentiate the differences between, palm tree tarot, tea leaf reading. It's all they're all small nuances, and I think some people have more of an affinity to one way or the other. It's very much like looking at a talisman. But if you're open to the truth, and that's really the key that is going to unlock what knowledge that you get from the ethers. If you're open to the truth, I think you could use any one of those mediums. The other nuance is that I would also see that some tools are a little bit better than others for certain things. So it comes down to timing. I would say astrology is one of the best tools to use. You could get it down to the minute. Whereas tarot, when I compare it to astrology, I say, well, it's kind of like a sundial compared to your digital watch. But tarot could also tease out a little bit more of some of the nuances of what's happening with third players in your life that astrology might not reveal as easily. So, another way I describe it too is, when you go, you have a cough, so this is working out perfectly here. So
I'm glad it's benefiting someone.
So say you go to your physician just to try to get your cough remediated or treated. He would listen to your chest. But if he really wanted to find out, a little bit more of the extent of how far your infection may have spread, he could do an X-ray. So that gives him yet another layer of information. And to really target what kind of antibiotic, he could give you a broad spectrum, but why not give you something a bit more specific if he does, for instance, a swab and determines that it's, say, a gram-negative or a gram-positive type of bacteria that you could take. So you put those all together, and it creates more of a complete picture. So, that's how I kind of tease out the nuances and the differences between all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense.
Yes, it does. I'm watching the modulation on here and keep thinking I've got some feedback going somewhere, but nobody's saying anything in the chat room, so I guess it must be okay.
What are we seeing?
Nothing. Just a little fluctuation in it when I'm not talking. So maybe it's the TV in the background.
Stop thinking so hard.
Oh, yeah, I gotta do that.
Stop. So, Cindy, would you say that reading the tarots is something that you learned, or is it an inherent gift?
I think we all have the gift. I think we all have the intuition.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to be so pretentious as to say, I was born with this great gift. We all have it. It was something, that you'd have to learn, kind of like reading or writing. You don't, most people are not born knowing how to read and write, mm-hmm. but we could all do it. And how fluently and how proficiently we do it is a matter of practice, a matter of determination, and a matter of, some people are a little bit better than others sometimes.
Probably a matter of learning how to listen to your inner voice, as it were. I don't hear voices, but occasionally something will just that strong sensation that no, don't do that, and 10 minutes later something falls right there and would have killed you. But
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I hear voices, so I'll openly admit that. But no, it's not the way. It's not the way that not the kind where they'd put me in the loony bin. It's kind of like when you could recall a conversation in your head. You hear the conversation, but you don't necessarily hear it as a vibrational type of voice. I think a lot of it too, Wendy. I mean, I would agree with what you're saying, and a lot of it is that you have to get out of the way. You have to remove your own bias. You have to really be open to whatever is out there, because we all have our own, our own little specific things, our own little wild or crazy or boring or whatever nuances that are happening in our lives, and if we just take the model of our lives or only our experiences and we use that as a filter, then you're going to definitely lose a lot of the information. And again, key is to really be open to the truth, because if you're not open to the truth, then it's not going to really trickle or flow.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree with that entirely. Well, I guess we could move on towards the eclipse, the upcoming eclipse, which will be on my birthday. So the universe is throwing me one heck of a party.
You get all the good stuff.
I know, right? Well, this year anyway.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because this is quite a month for eclipse. We just had a lunar eclipse 2 days ago on August 7th. Mm-hmm. And as you just mentioned, on August 21st, we'll have the upcoming solar eclipse that is nicknamed the Great American Eclipse. So if you don't mind, I kind of want to touch a little bit first on the lunar eclipse, since it's already passed. And,
sure.
And I could open up.
Take it and run with it. I don't mean to yell at you, but the people in the chat room are telling me that my volume seems to be lower than you guys's, and I've adjusted everything I can just right now, so here I am. Speaking of...
Yeah, I don't hear you yelling at me. But,
okay, good.
Okay, so with the lunar eclipse, that's when we see that the Earth gets in between the light from the sun and the moon. So you could see... interesting shadows of intense reds and browns and grays that start to obscure the moon. And the moon, if we look into it, Carl Jung referred to it as our shadow self. So we tend to kind of look at ourselves, and many of us that are not hypercritical are going to try to see our reflection in the most positive light as possible. But the lunar eclipse gives us a chance to really look at everything, warts and all. It could give a big shakeup to some people, and I think this past lunar eclipse, as a matter of fact, has, especially with the Leos out there, Wendy.
Yes.
So I'm saying that I know you're a Leo. But what it does is that it really gives us the opportunity to just accept and embrace ourselves, and swallow that jagged pill whole. And so long we could own up to the type of emotions that we don't enjoy having, like anger or rage or jealousy or fear. It helps us get more of a handle on them. So it would be a little bit of a wobble. And then we move on to the solar eclipse, which is the moon getting in the way of the sun, right in between the Earth and the sun, so it obscures the view. Both of them, the light is somehow diminished, so there's a level of darkness that you have to go to. But during the solar eclipse, it is a bit more striking, simply because this big yellow ball in the sky suddenly ceases to be, or seemingly so. So with this, with this type of, blackout or kind of shutting the lights in some way, it takes away the familiar and the visual ability to recognize things. Interestingly enough, though, even though we might tend to freeze at the beginning, it actually ends up being a burst of energy, because the reaction is I mean, aren't you going to freak out if you see suddenly that the sun is obscured?
Right. Night becomes day, day becomes night. Has it go? Cats and dogs living together.
Mass hysteria. Yes.
Yeah. But it really gives us a great chance to jump into new areas of our life. If you haven't gone beyond your backyard, now is the chance to do a little bit of boldness. Even if we feel forced there.
Right. Now, are you going anywhere to special to view the eclipse, or just gonna wing it?
I'm gonna have to wing it.
Or do you want to say over the air? Sorry.
Oh no, not. Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah. No, I'm going to wing it. I'm going to. I have the planet Uranus, which is the planet of disruption and unexpected events and left turns. That's really active right now in my chart. So the best laid plans are, if they happen, it's very fortunate. It's a blessing.
Okay.
So I will see. I will see where I end up landing.
Wonderful. Okay.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any suggestions for individuals wanting to view the solar eclipse?
Well, yeah. It depends on where exactly you are. I do know that in the general Kansas City, Missouri vicinity, and a little bit of Kansas, because the eclipse is going to go over, a tiny corner of the state of Kansas, and Leavenworth, Kansas, which is not too far away from Kansas City, Missouri, and in Hiawatha, they have some businesses and some groups that are sponsoring events. I know that 80 Acres in Leavenworth, Kansas, will be sponsoring a viewing event. In the Missouri area, in Kansas City, it's better to be north of the river because we're getting closer to the totality. So, I mean, it is such, this lunar eclipse, this upcoming solar eclipse really reminds me of when the Royals won and everybody came out, to celebrate. Right. And I feel like, the enthusiasm and the excitement coming up, the planning. I mean, even people that, that would shun more of the occult or the esoteric, they're coming out for just the event of it. So I would say north of the river is a lot better. There's, and a lot of small businesses. So there's Smoking Guns Barbecue and Catering up in North Kansas City. And you could go to Smithville Library, I heard, is sponsoring some events. And if we kind of look even more north of that, St. Joe. I mean, there's a million and one places to list. Yeah, and I've even been told by some people that they just plan to get as close to St. Joe as possible and park on the side of the highway. And I don't know if this is true or not, but rumor has it that that police officers are going to look the other way. And I, from what I understand, the National Guard's going to be up there to kind of help, keep control.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And we have, if you go more east, closer to Columbia, Missouri, out in Boonville, Oak Spirit Sanctuary, my good friend and astrologer, Bill Duvendak, will be doing a presentation out there.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. So, and we have one of the most important things is you have to get glasses. You just don't want to view it because, you're staring at the sun after all. I believe a lot of the public libraries you'd have to call because many of them did run out of supplies. I know Gifts and Decor out in, I believe it's either Olathe or Overland Park, Kansas. They're selling Eclipse glasses for only $1.99.
Oh, nice.
I mean, they're they're absolutely inexpensive, and it's a bargain.
Um,
So those are some of the places, and you want to make sure that you arrive early. The eclipse is going to occur, depending on where you are. But if I'm taking the whole general view of the span of, say, somewhere in Leavenworth, Kansas, to the outer limits of where we could see it in Kansas City, about depending on how far east or west you are, it would start at around 1:02 p.m. and end at 1:09 p.m. However, the eclipse itself, if you're under full totality in St. Joe, would be a total of about 2 minutes and 39 seconds.
Holy
So,
cow.
yeah. But if you're south of that, closer to, south of the river in Kansas City, I think it's only like 30 seconds that you could see it, and it's not complete totality.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lady in chat room that she's saying that she's down by Clemson University, I guess, South Carolina, and that there's not a lot of places to be, and that there'll be so many people converging on them that it'll jam the cell towers and everything too. So it's going to be a bit of a mess down there.
It's amazing when we have such an astronomical event like this, and I'm pun intended. Mm-hmm. But have you noticed that? Yeah, this is actually unifying people. This is getting people to participate together, and this is really a cause for celebration. I mean, a lot of times people would look at it as a bad omen, or a harbinger for sometimes good or bad. But I mean, it's I've seen it more and more increasingly positive. And we're the only continent that would be able to view this eclipse at this time.
I think that's kind of neat, very, very neat. Or the end of the world, whichever way it happens, right?
Yeah.
This is true. Very, very true.
Oh,
now,
please excuse Augie. I'm upstairs now, and he gets excited if I scooch wrong in my chair. So, and he's a great big German Shepherd boy. So.
Well, so do I. Damn it! So just stay still.
Well, just keep barking then, boy.
No, even he wants to be at the eclipse. So.
Exactly. Yes. Well, he probably wouldn't mind.
Exactly.
So, Wendy, when, I think you especially, when you mentioned the end of the world, I mean, as a Leo yourself, you're especially going to feel that because the sun is the ruler of Leo. So
right.
If you have some kind of Leo prominent, or the sun is prominent in your chart, those with Leo rising, possibly those with the Leo moon, I mean, you're going to, depending on what degree it is, you're going to really feel it a lot more intensely. I mean, this is, the Lord, the ruler of your sign. So. It is a bit more alarming, I think, to some Leos than it would be for other signs.
Oh, it doesn't actually alarm me. I'm excited about it, not nervous about it. So.
You're excited about the end of the world?
Yes. I'm ready. Dang it.
Damn, you're dark.
No, not even close. No tanning whatsoever this year, I swear. No pool time. It's sad.
Well, a little bit of trivia here. This is going to be the first time since 1918 that conditions will allow the shadow to cross the entire continent in the path of totality. And it's also the first eclipse in 1776 to fall exclusively on good old US of A. So we can celebrate that.
That's true.
That's kind of wild because 1776. That's a major year with close to the right dates. Does it? Golly, I don't know where I'm going with this. Go ahead, please. I lost my train of thought. Squirrel.
She digresses. she digresses a little bit. No. So in the Cindy, in the realm of astrological significance, does this solar eclipse have a resounding? Is there a message we could take away? Should we be opening ourselves to a higher spirituality, a higher plane? Are there things that we could do to prepare ourselves? I mean, those sound like extremely hollow questions, and they're not coming out exactly right. It's probably because of the cold medication that I'm on. So I've been living on Dayquil, NyQuil, Dayquil, NyQuil. I just walk around my office during the day carrying a bottle of Dayquil, just drinking it like coffee. I just trying to fight this thing. But is there? I guess, in a nutshell, what I'm saying is there a spiritual and esoteric significance to this solar eclipse?
It's from an astrological standpoint, what we get is a trigger for energy. It is a big burst of energy that we're going to have. And it's not like snapping your fingers and then magically, Cinderella gets transformed from, raggedy clothes to ballroom dressing. I mean, this is something that would take place, it depends on where in your chart it falls, but it might take, anywhere from up to 4 months to a whole, almost 3 years, closer to like 2 years and 9 months. If we look at it astrologically with the minute, every minute represents a year. We think about the 2 minutes and 40 or 41 seconds that it would really last until. But what we have to look at personally is that, we have to look at what kind of signs are involved and what they represent. So this eclipse is going to be happening in Leo. And, being the ruler of Leo and the sun shining so bright and majestically, what's associated with Leo is regality. It's Leo likes to be the center of attention. Leo rules the heart, so it likes to be at the heart of proceedings or things to roll forward. And what we could take with that personally is that it looks at your identity with the sun and your unique skills and talents and what makes you who you are individually. Now, we also have to look at, what balances this out. So the opposite of Leo is Aquarius, or, on the other pole, rather, is Aquarius.
That would be me. I'm Aquarius.
Oh,
okay. So Wendy and I are...
We're balanced.
Okay,
oh, I don't
that
know about
explains
that.
A lot of the good bouncing off that you have with each other.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Wow, that's really frightening.
So there might be some collar tugging, right? But at the end, it's a good thing. Mm-hmm. So what we have is, Aquarius is more and all about humankind. It's the collective. It's about us instead of me. And sometimes the sun might feel a little bit like it's not, with some aspects of Aquarius, sometimes, with that polar opposite, it might not feel like it's able to really shine as bright as it wants to in Aquarius because it's not allowed to be just the center stage. It's all of us around. So you have to also think about it's not just about yourself or what you're going to do, but what's good for everyone, the common goals, shared ideas, shared projects. It's kind of interesting because I think I know where you're heading to, Wendy, when you were asking about the 1776 chart and, or when this happened in 1776 rather, and how this ties in with America and this is over,
Thank you. I'm glad you caught it. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because if we look at one of my least favorite topics in the world, but everybody is very passionate about it, politics. If we look at the political aspect of it, and we look at who the leader of our country is, Donald Trump, who happens to have a Leo rising in his chart. And how America is very polarized. You get people that that blindly support him, even to their what others might describe as their own detriment, and then you got others that just passionately hate him and just wonder what in the world happened to America. How did someone pull the wool over our eyes? And then we're looking at, we got the sun and the moon involved. So the sun is the leadership, the moon is us as the common, the collective people, and how we feel and how we react to what the leaders do. It's interesting how it's all tied in, because given the political climate that we're in, and given that it is a eclipse in Leo, and it will be affecting the president directly, according to where it lands on his chart. It's amazing how how it hits certain planets almost head on. Mm-hmm. I think I would not be surprised within the next 2 years, 9 months, if we see major changes right after this eclipse. So I think we could find a way to unite rather than to be polarized.
And a question in the chat room, Deborah was asking if Aquarius is a water sign, and then she asks about Leo and what it is. Well, would you mind explaining that a little further for us?
Sure. So there's different elements and modalities in the chart, and water, fire, earth, and air are the different elements. Aquarius, a lot of people think it's a water sign because he has the jug of water, which represents knowledge that he keeps on, learning and pouring out for everybody. He's taking water from the stream and putting it back in. So it actually is an air sign. It's communication. It's ruled by Uranus, which was the god of the sky. And we
I'm sorry, and then, Travis and Aquarius, I'm sorry.
That's not funny.
Yeah, I have a feeling you wanted to pronounce Uranus differently, right? So,
well, yeah.
Oh, I'm pronouncing it very differently.
A rose is a rose, right?
That's right.
That's right. So with Leo, which is 180 degrees away from Aquarius and in the great circle in the sky of these constellations, Leo is fire. So, Leo brings in creativity. It brings in, it brings in vitality. It brings in passion and activity. It's. I think when you bring the two together, you could find. It's like kind of, when you're lighting a fire, you need a little bit of air in order to get the fire a bit more fierce and up and running. But too much air could put the fire out. Mm-hmm. And too much fire could suffocate you. So we always have to look at the balance between the two.
Quite the juggling act, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought it was water. I apologize to Deborah, but she didn't know either. And thank you so much for explaining that one.
Oh, a lot of people think it's water. It's an easy mistake.
Well, I'm all about the liquid. It doesn't necessarily have to be water, as Wendy well knows. So I'm all about the liquid side.
Which explains why you're chugging extra NyQuil and Dayquil.
Exactly.
I
think you need something just a little bit stronger there. But
trust
don't
me,
tell him that.
Please
don't tell him that. Once again, I lost my train of thought on that. Travis, do you have any questions?
I think it's something stronger.
I'm drinking something stronger. I have a hot tea with honey lemon and Fireball whiskey. What are you talking about? It doesn't get. It's good stuff. It's taking.
Well, so if we look at it personally, if you don't mind me just kind of grabbing the mic back to me, I'm sorry about that.
Oh, please bring it all in.
Fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
It was your show to go for it.
Okay. So if we're looking at what does the eclipse mean to you,
mm-hmm.
there are several different things astrologically that we look at. So let's just start with the generalities and see what your sign is.
Okay.
Now, keeping in mind that this Leo-Aquarius axis, if we're looking at polarities and the opposite sets of signs, when we're looking at people who are Aries or Libra, we're going to have to look at the 11th or the 5th houses. So to tell you what the 11th or the 5th house is, When we render an astrology chart, it is a snapshot of the sky at the exact moment and location that we are. And when you're doing a natal chart, it happens to be at the exact time that you were born. And this chart is divided into 12 different sections, very much like a clock. If we look at every section, they look like slices of a pie, and each one of those slices are called houses. And every house represents a different area of your life. It could be children, it could be love, it could be career, it could be how you approach things. But it's kind of like when we have night and day, we have a polarity there. We have to have the balance. We have to have the on, the off, the in, the out. So what we're looking at is when we see when we're looking at Aries and Libra, we have to look at what does Aries rule and what does Libra rule. Aries is more the fire. It's the first sign. It's the go-getter. It's the trailblazer. And Libra is the person that wants to get along and wants to pair with people. They're both cardinal, meaning they're starters. They're self-starters. Mm-hmm. And what you got to look at with that, when you look at balancing the two, is trying to see your groups and associations. The creativity of your love affairs together, what you give birth to, and your friends. Then we can move on to Taurus and Scorpio. And, with Taurus, it's a fixed sign. Scorpio is also fixed. Taurus is earth, and Scorpio is water. And what we're looking at with that is, we have to see, Taurus, when you have fixity, you have stubbornness. Taurus is very stubborn. Scorpio is also very stubborn. Taurus looks at more what you have to value, your possessions, and Scorpio looks more at the knowledge that is intangible. So when you look at the two of those together, we have to look at money, what you place value upon in your life, joint finances, sexual nature, how you share things with others. Mm-hmm. So we go on to Gemini, and on the opposite pole would be Sagittarius. Gemini is an air sign, and Sagittarius is fire. They're both mutable, which means that they're adaptable. They could roll with things. And Gemini likes to communicate. So does Sagittarius. Gemini communicates more within your community, within what's familiar. And Sagittarius likes to go beyond the horizon. So you have to look more at the bigger picture and travel. Sagittarius also rules travel, higher education, philosophy. So those are things we have to keep in mind. Gemini, how you communicate, how you deal with your siblings and your neighbors. So the whole point is kind of bringing us together. These are, and then they're both into education. These are two signs that you'd have to look at more, how you would communicate with people, how you would try to find commonalities if possible. Then we move on to Cancer, and the opposite pole of that would be Capricorn. And Cancer really likes a lot of comfort. Cancer is about the home. It's about family. Cancer is a water sign, and we look at Capricorn, and Capricorn is an earth sign. And they're both cardinal, so they're both going to be go-getters, but because Cancer is water, it's going to kind of be a bit more passive-aggressive, whereas Capricorn, it's a horned animal. It's going to take things a bit more head-on. So with that, what we're going to look at is your home, your family, where you come from versus your career, your vocation, where you're heading in life, and looking for the balance between the two of those. And when we look at Leo and Aquarius, we already touched a little bit on that, but the overall really is when you're looking at me, how does it participate with us? And when you're looking at us, are you including yourself in it for the greater good. Leo is the fire, Aquarius is air, and they're both fixed. So those are they're also two rather stubborn signs. And I mean,
yeah.
Sorry, Travis. As much as a lot of Aquarius like to deny it, you guys are fixed. You guys are stubborn. And
we didn't even get into coughing. He must have gone into a coughing fit and muted himself.
Yeah, either that or the strong stuff really is working.
No, actually, I did have a coughing spell. I had muted it, and I had forgot to unmute it. I was actually talking. I just didn't realize that I hadn't unmuted the mic.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I said we are extremely stubborn. Mm-hmm. I'm an extremely stubborn individual, very set in many of my ways. I just don't like other people to be set in their ways.
Yeah, that's a very Aquarian way of thinking. It really is. It's, I'm very liberal as long as you agree with me.
Right.
That kind of thing. So. And finally, we have Virgo, and the opposite pole, we have Pisces. So those are two more immutable signs, the two more adaptable signs. Virgo, the earth, and Pisces being water. And Virgo really does have they're not fixed, but they like a set regimen. They're creatures of habit. Whereas Pisces is just going to go with the flow and what feels natural to them. So you really have to look. Virgo kind of likes looking at, Virgo is a hard worker. Virgo is symbolized by the the great harvest. Pisces, being at the tail end, has gone through all of those incarnations, so it has a lot more wisdom to it. It understands what sacrifice is and understands what just acceptance, and it's pretty forgiving. It's pretty mystic. So when we're looking at that, it's trying to balance the two of them. We have to look at, trying to balance your spiritual path with your health, your work, what kind of sacrifices you make for others, not to get too stuck in the regimented rituals, and, to make sure that you're also in touch with spirituality too. So, if you have, I really think if you look at the signs more, especially, some of the, the planets that are in Leo, or if you're looking at the sun in the chart, those would be key things to look at in your chart, as well as the moon, since the moon is playing we wouldn't have an eclipse without the moon. So what I would say is that, the last time we had this type of an eclipse that happened in the Leo-Aquarius axis was around 18 years ago. So, you might want to look back to 18 years ago. That would take us to what, 1999 or so? Mm-hmm. Look back at what happened in your life, and this might tend to be a repetitive theme. The other thing we got to look at is something called, the degrees, which, if we look at it as not the second hand of the clock, but the seconds hand, the 60 seconds for a minute, mm-hmm. Which probably should be called the third hand, but never heard anyone call it that.
Right.
So we look at, we're trying to, if we get down to the nitty gritty and we want to get down to the degrees, and there's 30 degrees per slice of the pie, or per house, per sign. This eclipse, where the moon and the sun are going to be right next to each other, is going to happen at 28 degrees Leo. So we want to look at your chart and see what other planets might be close to 28 degrees. It could, I would look more at the, somewhere between 26 to possibly to 29 degrees or 0 degrees, maybe in the next sign, depending on where the placements are. But the whole point is, if those are activated, by the eclipse, meaning there's some kind of contact made. It might be a planet that's 90 degrees away from where the sun or the moon is. That would be a square. That would be a tense aspect. It could be possibly 120 degrees away. So maybe, and that's a positive aspect, so we want to look at that and see, well, is this a chance to be a good stepping stone, a nice, possibly even a nice icebreaker for your life? It gets really nuanced in astrology. I think, honestly, astrology is as complicated as the law or as medicine. If you really, there's so many layers to it. But personally, just as a generality, what we look at is this is the chance for really taking this burst of energy and going into something new. You might, if you were looking to possibly say you've always been an employee and instead want to open up your own business, great time to get charged for it. If you haven't traveled and you want to see other places, I would take that as kind of an injection of inspiration and will and courage. So that's just the generality of it all.
Nice, very, very nice. Oh, dang it! Once again.
Sorry, I had another coughing fit. I'm back. Although I did hear what Cindy said, and I think it was very eloquently put.
Thank you.
Oh, very much so. Yes, thank you.
Very, very much so. I couldn't have come close to that, especially not tonight. Maybe channeling the NyQuil, something might flow out, and the Fireball whiskey. But no.
As we cringe and go, "Oh Lord, no, please."
Oh no! What can you say? I know. Hey, so far we haven't had to use the disclaimer tonight, so that's a good thing.
True. Yes.
I'm intrigued. What is your disclaimer?
Not everything that comes out of Travis's mouth is what we both believe or think.
We are one of the few radio shows the disclaimer was actually created because of one of the co-hosts, not our guests or call-ins or the chat room.
Well, sometimes we get the holy rollers that that are a little too much for me to personally handle too. So.
Well, a lot of the holy rollers are too much for me to handle, but I do respect a wide variety of belief systems. Mm-hmm. So, one of the reasons I'm no longer an active minister, they don't really appreciate necessarily that welcoming kind of mentality. That and they don't think that their pastor should smoke cigars and drink scotch for some reason. I never understood that. But
well, and what's really nice about that, Travis, is that with the view from the other side, with you really being involved in it, you really fully understand, the reason why people are trying to control it or trying to restrict it. You get where they're. I don't know. Would you think it's based on fear, or has this helped you with your understanding of looking, at things that are considered occult or forbidden?
I think it's a combination of several things, and that sounds like a cop-out answer, but I do think one of the problems that I had with especially organized evangelical Christianity was that they wanted to believe in certain aspects of spirituality and not in others. They wanted to pick and choose. Mm-hmm. And I don't believe that you can do that. I don't believe that you can, if you are going to say that you are, and Wendy's already cringing because I'm getting that, that preacher pulpit tone. I was going to say, I don't think that you can call yourself a quota, and of course I come from the South, and I come from the Appalachians of Virginia and Kentucky and Tennessee, which is, it's not just the Bible Belt. We're the damn belt buckle of the Bible Belt. We have there's more brands of Baptist than there are of, of soda in this area. But I don't think that you can call yourself a God-fearing, Bible-believing Christian if you are going to say, well, at one time there was a certain amount of miraculous workings and spirituality, but that doesn't happen today. Or there was a time when there were individuals, male and female, that were gifted with the ability to see things and to give insight, whether you call it prophecy, whether you call it seeing, whether you call it spiritual guidance or whatever. And now we don't need that. That doesn't happen. I don't think that spirituality is bound by time and space. I don't think because it's the 21st century that spirituality is no longer applicable. And there were a lot of individuals in churches that didn't want that. And I think it was done out of fear, and I think it was done out of not knowing, because I do think we fear what we do not know and what we do not understand. And unfortunately, my experience had been that there was a lot of ignorance. And I don't mean stupidity, and I don't mean dumb. I just mean there was a lot of ignorance in the churches. People believed traditions, and they believed the ways that they had been taught, and they never questioned for themselves. If they had, they would have gotten some very different answers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they would have had a different understanding of what spirituality, because I don't even consider myself, I don't use the term that I'm religious or that I'm Christian. I think I prefer the term that I'm spiritual. Yes. I have a belief in a higher power. Do I call that higher power God? Yes, I do, because that fits my construct. That fits that works for me. Do I think that God is an old man with a long beard and a white robe? No, I don't think that at all. But the term God, I don't have a problem with, because for one, I don't think that God is a term that is masculine or feminine. I don't. I just think it's there. So I do have a belief in the higher power. Do I love talking about it? Yes, I do. I love discussing it. I love debating it. I love that dialogue. I love that. But at the end of the day, am I willing to stand in front of a group of people and tell them the way that they should believe? No, I can't do that. I mean, I can. Don't get me wrong. I had many people tell me. I had many people tell me that they would sit and listen to me talk all day and do whatever I said. That's the dangerous thing. I don't want that. I don't want you to just follow what I say. I want you to actually think for yourselves.
And White Travis is my good co-host. Although he does pretty much obey me pretty much, so it really works out well.
I'm well trained. What can I say?
You are.
I like my Scoopy snacks, you know.
Maybe that's what you should be using for your cough instead.
I definitely think that but I have several friends who are still ministers, evangelical, Southern Baptist, Pentecostal, Charismatic, across the board, and we have these discussions occasionally, and have had them over the years. Can you be quote unquote Christian, but also believe in psychic abilities and the supernatural and paranormal phenomena? And many of them say, no, you cannot, because all of that is of the devil. All of that is evil. All of that is occultic. All of that is satanic. And I don't feel that way. I've never felt that way. Mainly because I've had many of these same people tell me stories about basically them getting premonitions, having insight into something, and they just simply claim that it was God or the Holy Ghost that gave them the premonition, and all that they're doing is having some type of psychic. And I don't say psychic like Miss Cleo psychic. I'm talking in kind of in the Latin term of psyche, and they had this moment where they were on another plane and they had a vision. They saw something, and it actually was true what they saw. I remember one of the pastor's wives was telling the story over dinner one night that she remembered they had their first child, and the child was playing in another room, and the wife said, she was cleaning and doing, and all of a sudden she stopped dead in her tracks, and she heard a voice that simply said, choking. And she went to check on the baby, and the baby the child had been playing with a crayon, had swallowed the crayon, and it was lodged in his throat, and it was choking.
Oh, my word.
Wow.
And, they attributed that to God giving them a moment of clarity, a vision in which that they were able to then go save the life of their child. Well, was it God? Was it something psychic? Was it just them operating at that particular moment on a different plane? I don't know. But I don't shut my mind to it being any or all of those.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because you don't even have to look at God for something like that. I mean, what about just something as simple as mother's intuition?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting with, and I think you would appreciate this, especially with your, with your Baptist background. If we look at the astronomical origins of religions and how they're, the personifications of the astrological phenomena in the sky, would end up imprinting on people to personify it, to play it out. I mean, this is, I don't know if you've heard of astrotheology. That's the field that kind of looks at, how the heavenly bodies had actually participated in modern day religions. When we look at the cardinal seasons, like when you see that the winter solstice has occurred, that's when the sun is at the lowest point in the sky, and it stays there for 3 days, and then it finally starts to come up higher, and the days last longer again. And if you correspond that to Christianity, that's, Christ died and he rose again.
Exactly.
When we forward, closer to Easter, and we have Aries, but we also have the resurrection of Christ, but right. Aries is the springtime. It's after all this death, finally something new starts to come up. And the correlations, I mean, if we look at the 12 apostles, yet we have 12 right. signs.
The 12 tribes of Israel.
Exactly.
Yep.
So it actually, I think, this is my personal belief, but I tend to be among the leaning to say that, there's a lot of pagan origin to not only just the Abrahamic religions, but even a lot of the ancient religions, even the Zoroastrian religions in Persia, or the ancient Egyptian religions with the pharaohs. It's interesting how it's all tied into a story, yet it seems like the story has ended up changing as generations go on and leaders change, and
agendas change.
Yes.
People's belief systems completely. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's interesting because we have, this interesting presidency, this interesting political climate right now. And I don't know if you saw it on CNBC 2 days ago, which happened to be the day of the lunar eclipse, but the headline read, "Trump has escaped Washington, but don't call it a vacation."
Yes,
and
I saw that.
he's a workcation, he calls it. He's decided to go away. He's going to be away from the 7th until, drum roll, can you guess which date?
21st.
22nd?
Yes.
Yeah.
21st. Well, I would think the 22nd would be smarter, but yeah. And what gets even more interesting is that you wonder, well, what's the big deal? Why, what does moving have to do with it? And if you look at something, if we look at relocation astrology, or we take, we take our charts and we somehow correlate it to the map of the world. So, say for instance, you're born at 9 o'clock on the East Coast, and I'll make it, let's say 12 o'clock, so it's high noon. Somewhere a little bit beyond the West Coast, you might see that the sun is just rising, just coming up, so it would be right on the horizon, the ascendant in astrology. So the whole point is that if you're close to a certain line and a certain axis in your chart, a certain angle in your chart, you could actually move away from it if you wanted to avoid a certain action, or you could move towards some. If you're looking for a certain type of energy in your life. Now, what we have here is that nearby Washington, D.C., with Trump's natal chart, with the time that's given, now it's 10:54 p.m., although there's some dispute to that, but I'm not going to get into that now.
Right. Yeah.
We have the planet Mars that was coming up on the eastern horizon, so it was just about to come up. And where that lands on the map in America is nearby Washington, D.C. Mars is, he's the combatant planet. He's the warrior. He's, he was the god of war. He's assertion. He kind of brings fights. I mean, Donald Trump is kind of in your face. He's a little bit, he's a bombastic guy. I mean, so, with that, you might not want to be next to your Mars line. You don't know what kind of explosive energy might be around there, what kind of confrontations that you may have to face. So, he moved away from it. He moved far away enough from it so that he doesn't have to be affected. And what's interesting is that, when I think he's in New Jersey right now, close enough to New York, close enough to where he was born, to where that is closer to the imprint on his natal chart, what's imprinted on his, the timestamp, his geotag, so to speak. So, it really, if you peel away the layers and you start looking into it, you actually start seeing the answers right in front of you.
Very interesting.
Do you figure in any like ley line type energy into your astrological charts and things? Sorry.
Yeah, well, there's kind of what I call your personal ley lines, and there's a field of astrology called astrocartography, which is trademarked, and that is, that's very similar to what I described about, if, say, for instance, you're looking for vitality and a good career and possibly to find fame and just to kind of be in the limelight, you're going to want to be close to your own personal ley line, so to speak, of where the sun is at the top of your chart, the midheaven. So you would look for a midheaven where exactly on in the world that the sun was at high noon. And if you move over to that line, chances are your life is going to be changing in a very positive way. Of course, we got to look at the chart and take, if you have, if your sun is badly connected with some planets that would only amplify those problems, then you definitely want to stay away from there. So we have to kind of, look at it holistically. Mm-hmm. But there's general ley lines, as a way to describe it, called a geodetic chart, which kind of gives different energies to areas of the world. It's not really proven. I've looked into it. I don't really follow that part too much because it just doesn't seem to line up. I mean, it would describe, for instance, the Midwest as being Scorpio, and Midwest doesn't really feel so scorpionic. It feels a little bit more, Cancer, with the apple pie families and I know he's a fictional character, but Superman and how people take
Well,
you in,
still.
and you know.
Right.
You know.
Interesting. Yeah, I always get curious. I'm always curious about that. So I ask a lot of our guests about ley lines and what they think about them and how they, if they do think of them at all, you know, how it plays into what they do.
Well, you know what, Wendy, with you, I mean, I have your chart information, and I think you especially would be hyper alert to this because in the Kansas City area, you've got almost a vortex of energy going on there, where you have a north node ley line, which indicates some kind of heritage or connection to the land from, you know, either genetic heritage or a previous life. You have Neptune right at the top of your chart at the midheaven. You have a ley line, a Neptune ley line going there, which is very spiritual. It's going to lend a career in spirituality for you. And you have a Mars ley line, which is on your descendant, where, you know, it was setting in your chart. It was setting on the western horizon at the time that you were born. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you have a lot of energies, and especially with the Neptune in your chart there, I know that you're into the paranormal. I mean, you're really going to be able to sense that and to feel that. And I would have imagined that, you know, with the Mars energy there, you got a lot of opposition from people. You know, I mean, so much opposition that people might ask, why don't you go somewhere more beneficial? But why would you when you have North Node on the IC, on the lower, you know, the lower heaven in your chart, where you're like rooted? This is home, and this is, you know, I mean, why leave where your roots, where your spiritual roots are? So you especially, I mean, you have amazing energy in the Kansas City area, and to find that where you're born is, it's magnificent. I mean, you don't really get too many opportunities like that.
Mm-hmm. Is that common, or just average, or what?
It you know, it might be. It's not uncommon for someone to be born next to a major line. So major. When I say major line, I mean where there's a planet that's either that was either high noon, rising, setting, or on the opposite side of the Earth at midnight. And they all have a pull there. So, it's not uncommon to find somebody with one line, kind of close to where they're born. But to find three lines, and the combination that you have is unusual. Especially, you got Neptune, which is, it's a watery planet, and you got Mars, which is fiery. And you put those two together, and you get this nice steam.
Okay.
Yeah. So, you are always going to be able to delve. I mean, it's going to be your nature. There was no ifs, ands, or buts about it for you. And then you've got your moon in the 9th house in Scorpio. You got Neptune in Scorpio. So you're going to penetrate deeply into that. You're going to look for answers, and that's what's going to emotionally satisfy you.
That's pretty much always been that way, even if it wasn't in spirituality or paranormal. It's always been something. Yeah, I like to figure out puzzles and get the answers.
Yeah.
And she would have gotten away with it too if it hadn't been for those pesky kids and their dog.
Yeah, but it's my dog. What am I going to do about that part?
I know.
Well, that's very, very neat. Would you email me your findings or something? Is it in a file you can send, or do you want to? I mean, I know that's your livelihood, and well, I can't afford it right now, but when I can, I could always send them.
I mean, absolutely. I could give you a call and we could discuss your chart. I mean,
okay,
that's
cool.
My pleasure. You too, Travis.
Thank you.
Okay. I've never had one done.
Oh, you're going to really enjoy it.
Yeah, I never have.
Yeah.
it's extremely interesting. Would you like to tell us about your business and how you conduct it and how people can get a hold of you there?
Yeah, so I'm the owner of Kansas City Astrology and Tarot, and you could find me at www.kansascityastrology.com. And the most common readings that people like are the astrology and the tarot. When I used to do in-person readings, people used to come in for palmistry as well, but you can't do palm readings over the phone, so
no.
Yeah. But I mean, I think you really could render a whole lot from just astrology or tarot alone. I used to, one of the things I used to, when I would do palmistry, I used to take prints of the hands and share that and tell people, if you're going to come back, in 6 months to a year, let me have a copy so then we could compare to see if there's any changes, especially if there were any major life events. But your palm is just going to really give you more of a general look, and your palm is more of a reflection of how you're doing in life in general. So it's kind of, it's kind of like, if you're doing well and you're totally in balance, you're going to have a natural glow. But if you had a rough night's sleep, it's going to show. The hands tend to record, more of the major events and gives a very general type of outlook. So you don't get as much. When I used to do palmistry, I used to tell people, do you mind if I pull some cards out too, so we could really answer the questions. But that's how you could get in touch. And you could just, you could phone or text at 816-895-2545.
Excellent. Do you use a specific set of tarot cards?
I use Rider-Waite, and sometimes I use some variations of Rider-Waite. But I mean, I don't have a. I'm lucky. I mean, for me, it's more. I use it as a talisman. So if I get, say I lost my cards or I forgot to bring some with me while I'm traveling, and I bought a new pack at the, at the bookstore. That's. I mean, I tend to, if I'm using the same cards over and over again, I tend to clean them, so I don't like to keep all the residual energy. I know there are readers out there that feel that it kind of enriches their cards and it enriches their readings. And it really, I think it's a personal preference, and it really varies on whether the person is reading your energy or if they're trying to read, the messages out there in the ethers. And, you could even read what the person's energy is from the ethers, so why go to two places if you could go to one?
Very true. I agree. I just remember going to a Halloween event and as a fortune teller, dressed as a fortune teller. I had a Rider-Waite with me, and their fortune teller did not show up. And people kept asking me if I was the fortune teller. And I'm no. But they talked me into sitting down, and I'd pull a 3-card spread or what have you, and came up with one really smart-ass comedian guy. And the very first card that came up for him was Temperance. And I thought, if that's not apt, if that's not the most appropriate card on earth for this guy, then I'm not sitting here doing this. That was a lot of fun. Well, go ahead. Please.
Yeah, it's really interesting how these work. I was doing a talk at the Kansas City Dowsing Society, and I also use dowsing, the pendulums, sometimes to look at what direction or what card to pick. You could just, it's a radius it's measuring your energies. And I was showing them how I use a pendulum with cards. And I was explaining to them that my ley line was a Pluto line, and what it's like living on a Pluto line. And I went ahead and I used the pendulum to pick a card out of the 78, the whole deck, and it was amazing what happened. I picked up the card. It was a Pluto card. It was death.
Oh,
and I was kind of like, well, I was just talking about this topic and how how dark things could get when Pluto, is a strong force in your life. And I'm not kidding you, the lights went out.
Oh, timing is everything, right?
And these were very open, mystical people, and even they were freaked out. I was freaked out, but I was
right. Oh, goody, yeah.
But I think if you're in tune, these synchronicities are going to work for you. So what Travis was talking about earlier, with the mother who heard the word choke and found the crayon in her son's throat. Let's just look at the whole universal language of love. If we're all just tuned into that, that really cuts through a lot of BS and gets to the core of.
Yeah, strengthens everything, pretty much.
Yeah, the purest connection.
Very much so. Well, what else would you like to share with us? Or do you have anything?
Well, yeah, go ahead, Travis.
No, I was going to ask, early you mentioned the history of the tarot. Some claiming Egypt, Mesopotamia, France, Italy. Where's your personal belief? I mean, obviously you have to have some strong inclination of where this originated. Do you have one?
With tarot, no, I haven't really cared as long as I got to him. It's kind of like if your Scooby snack works, well, who cares where it comes from? But no, I'm kidding. No, it looks more, if you look at the origin of tarot, it's derived from the word truth.
Oh,
and
okay.
Yeah, when we're tied in with the truth, I think it doesn't matter where it originates, because it's all here on the same planet in the same universe, and we have to look at, when we're tied into the facts. I think the origin, and you were talking about, God a little bit. I mean, you just tie it in to God, or whatever way that you may personally define God. It doesn't have to necessarily be. It doesn't have to be cards. Those are just a talisman. I've seen people use dry leaves that fall off a tree. I think the Bible might have used. They talked about the golden fleece, which to me is, it's kind of related in that you're looking for a sign.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so instead of looking for, what are the external energies that are affecting me, in other words, the planets and the stars that may impel you, but not compel, you're actually looking for a more direct answer, the truth. And like I said, whether they be cards or leaves or, some people, I've seen people use seashells. That's why I've tried to get into the origin, and it was fuzzy, and at the end I tried not to delve into it more, because I just feel I was going to get the answer as long as
right. Okay.
Right. Yeah. No.
I was just curious.
But what is interesting is that the variations of the tarot cards, when you go from culture to culture, is the way that some of the characters look. So, in America they have a bit more of an Anglo look. If you look at some of the cards that are more local to the Far East, they definitely have a more Asian look to them and a more Asian theme. Things that would make sense to their world. So instead of a castle, they'll have a palace, for instance. Instead of a king, they'll have an emperor.
Interesting.
Very interesting. I had one that it caught my fancy years ago, and it was the Celtic Dragon tarot deck, and I liked it because of the pretty dragons and stuff. Let's see.
Well, if it resonated with you, and it's
it did,
yes.
I mean,
yeah. It's interesting because with the eclipse, the in the Far East in China, I believe it was, they would traditionally shoot arrows into the sky because they thought they were dragons obscuring the sun.
Mm-hmm.
The dragons are tied. I mean, they're a fire sign there too.
Wow.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's tied in with you, and
possibly.
Interesting.
Yeah, there it went again. Well, I'm reading the one man in chat room. He's going to start a jelly bean club, and
what? A what?
Instead of a coffee club, a jelly bean club, and it's a little distracting sometimes. I do apologize.
Right.
There was a question in the chat room though, and she was wondering what you charge to do a chart for someone.
I charge a flat rate of $40 for 30 minutes, or $75 for an hour.
Okay, and that's a Skype or telephone session, and you talk to them about it all. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
There you go, Deborah. Well, I was curious, where have you lived, if you don't mind talking about that? It looks like several different countries and over a pretty good time period.
Yeah, so where I count living is if I've been there for at least 6 months, and I've lived with the locals, not in an expatriate community. Mm-hmm. So that would include 8 different countries across Asia, Africa, and Europe. So I was in Africa for a total of about 8 years, Europe for around 4 years, and Asia for 2.5 years. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and I left when I was 18. And I had, I was born with a travel bug. I mean, in my astrology chart, I am a Taurus with a Leo rising, so I'm supposed to have a high degree of fixity, but I'm able to, with the travel components in my chart, I end up moving quite a bit.
Interesting.
So, And every country it's interesting, their take on astrology or, just any of the occult things. I mean, it doesn't matter, what area of, the quote-unquote occult, the hidden knowledge. But, the countries that you would not expect to be into it, like countries in the Middle East, are so, they're very versed in it. I mean, they really know it inside out. And, then they're going out to their mosques, their churches, and their synagogues to go and pray. So there's a very strong tie in there. I lived in Germany for a bit too, and people were curious. They would talk about it kind of like you would discuss the movies. It was a conversation piece, but, typical of the German culture, when you found people that were into it, they were especially in it for the precision. Mm-hmm. So it is really interesting how different cultures put their imprint on and their approach on how they look at the esoteric and the occult.
Very interesting. Did you have a favorite place?
I did have a lot of favorite places, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Yeah.
Neat. That's good.
So, yeah. Yeah, I like Germany a lot. I was in Egypt for a bit too, and the country itself is very beautiful and it has a lot of history there that you can learn from. Ghana was a country where I've learned a lot of magic. Actually, Ghana is a very interesting place because when people would go to healthcare clinics, there's a lot of mixed religions, meaning anime religions, like groups or communities that would have a rain god or a sun god or a fertility god. That they are kind of turnkey. They're kind of really personalized to them or their family or community. And when people in the villages would go to the healthcare centers, the doctors would look at them and examine them and they would get their prescription. And if you were a Western doctor working there, the patient would say, "Well, that's great, but what kind of magic am I supposed to do?"
Oh.
And so they quite often had the village shaman or whatever you want to call it, the witch, the witchcraft doctor, whatever, the guru,
wise person, maybe.
Yeah. And they would also prescribe usually a type of ritual. So they'll, one of the examples that I witnessed was, he told the family, okay, you have to take the family icon, and the family icon was this. It was just it was a wooden head of an African carved on a stick, and it was supposed to represent the face of beauty in general, just to attract beautiful things to you. And they were told, take the family icon, bury it in your yard, make sure you get the menstrual blood from a virgin to put on top of that.
Goody. Well, what a fun one, yeah.
And at a certain time of the day when the sun was at the highest point, to try to get 7 family members for 7 days to dance around it for at least a minute and a half. I'm not kidding you. This person improved dramatically, and it wasn't like about getting over a common cold. I mean, this was magic in action. So, I mean, and people will kind of look at it and be like, oh, yeah, well, that's in Africa, and there's people that live in trees, and, they sell arms and drugs, and,
right.
There's actually a lot of deep knowledge. Yeah. And something else, and this might, this is kind of off topic, but somewhat related, and this was, in Africa was where I found the highest number of people, probably even more than in what you would find in America, that believe in aliens and the alien visitations. And they actually have them in their folklore and carved in their walls and, explaining, some of their origin and differentiating why some people among their community would be royalty versus not.
That's really interesting. And I imagine that Travis, with his fixation with aliens, is now, his ears are up like my German Shepherd's ears at full attention. Was that a heavy sigh, or were you yawning, Travis?
It was a heavy sigh. Coming out of a heavy coughing fit again. I apologize.
Dang it.
Yeah. Now, I had one other question real quickly.
Sure.
Legitimately, do you see individuals' astrological signs impacting their interpersonal relationships? When people come to you and are saying, should I marry this person because this, they're this sign, I'm that sign. Do you see that actually impacting and playing out in very legitimate ways?
Yes and no. So we're more to our chart than just our sign. So
Understood.
You're an Aquarius.
Okay.
I'm a Taurus. We are not supposed to be romantically compatible. However, if we looked at our Venus placements, our Mars placements, possibly our North Node, if we look at the asteroids like for instance, Eros, Volcanus, we could see, we might be able to see that there's so much compatibility there that, I'm, play on words here, it would eclipse the differences between our our Taurus and our Aquarius sun signs.
Okay, understood.
Yeah.
So it's much more in depth than just saying I'm born in January, you're born in May, or et cetera, et cetera.
It is more in depth than that, but I do find that there is. It's like that great title of the book where men are from Mars and women are from Venus. Where you have to look at, is there going to be some kind of commonality? Is there going to be friction?
Mm-hmm.
And I see this especially with polar signs, meaning signs that, where you're going to find, they're opposite each other, like the Leo and the Aquarius, or Virgo and Pisces, Aries and Libra, Gemini and Sagittarius, Taurus and Scorpio, where there's some kind of push me, pull you sometimes. But, you would see that, some astrology books would say, well, you know what, because they're opposite, they're not compatible. And you would actually see two people that couldn't be better together. But you would also see more dynamic with them than you would see with, say, two Aquarians together.
Right.
I do think that the generalities do apply in a lot of ways. I mean, we could talk about what it's like to be an American, and that's a generality. But there is a very big difference from, between an American from the Northeast versus an American from the Midwest.
Right.
That's kind of like going into the nitty-gritty of things. And we can't look at it and say, well, no American would ever really match with for instance, say a Middle Eastern person. Well, what if they have, common beliefs or common faith, common way of thinking? Well, all of that goes out the window with the generalities.
That makes perfect sense.
Sorry, I'm going to answer a question. Anise is more like ouzo or absinthe, the black licorice flavor. So, yeah. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, guys, I do apologize for that.
Are you back on the Jelly Bean of the Month Club or whatever this thing is this person's starting?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm going to start an ice cream club.
I'm starting a bottle of wine of the month club every day. What do you want? What's your point?
Yeah, I saw that you had a news article done with how to use the astrology and tarot and workouts. What was that about, Cindy?
Oh, that was a really fun piece with KCTV5 in Kansas City, which Travis is the CBS affiliate. Here in Kansas City. Okay. And that was using astrology to determine your workout. And we kept it very general. Yeah, so we looked at, we try to group them together to see, into the elements. So the fire signs would have, preferred one kind, a specific kind of exercise. The earth signs, for instance, would have been a bit more economical with their activity and or their exercise and incorporated it into their activities. The water signs would have preferred some kind of water sport or something that would bring kind of a zen or a spirituality to it. And the air signs, would be into sports or activities where there might be some more social activity involved. When we're looking at, and when we look at rulerships too, so every sign rules over different parts of the body. When we're looking at, say, Aquarius, that rules a part of the legs, that walking, for instance, might be something preferable to an Aquarius. Then we also look at, Pisces that could also get into walking because they rule the feet, but you think about them being a water sign, so they might be more into the water. It's really, it was a generality. It was a really fun piece. I really enjoyed doing it, and I would look forward to an opportunity to do more with that. But what I I mean, it's interesting because I think, when you're looking at something like exercise, you're going to really like it or really dislike it. I mean, it's not, it's not like food where some people might crave it, or you need it every single day in order to sustain yourself. I think there's different approaches and different views, but that would have been a nice stimulator if you could look at your sign just to at least get an idea if you don't know where to start.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. Very good place to look.
Yeah.
I'm thinking it might help you stick with a certain regime as opposed to just flip-flopping around and searching forever and not sticking with anything at all, really.
I would think so, but if say that if someone say is some kind of fire sign, an Aries, a Sagittarius, or Leo, but they have a lot of water in their chart, they might have either more of a variety to look at, or they might really feel more in tune with a water sport than they would a high impact type of sport. So again, it's kind of like what Travis asked about, would you just look at the signs just to see compatibility? It goes beyond that, but it is a good place to start.
My dog keeps coming in, and he pokes me in the back of the head. Yes, he is that tall, where I'm sitting in my chair. Mom, what you doing? What you doing?
Actually, Wendy's just that short. It's not that her dog is that tall.
Well, it's actually a combination. It has so many things. What? Yeah, Augie is 32 inches at the shoulder, so or 33. I forget. Yeah.
Oh. Well, you have Jupiter in the sixth house, and the sixth house is small animals, so that would domestic animals, so that would include your dog, and it's in Cancer, so you're going to have a very big heart. I mean, that's family to you.
Yeah, it is completely.
And you're going to have a very big heart when it comes to to animals and to small children, and people that you're good at taking care of. Nurturing people that might be sick or need help or, a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah, yep, that sounds like me, actually, a lot.
Yes, it does, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
It's interesting, too, with how this works, because Ronald Reagan actually had his own in-house astrologer, and Joan Quigley, was from Kansas City, Missouri. And they regularly used astrology to guide them with their daily personal decisions, and I suspect even their political decisions.
Wow, I had no idea.
It's well, he was an Aquarius, so he was going to be open, to that. I think probably, speaking of open, he was probably one of the presidents that were more just open about sharing it. J.P. Morgan of J.P. Morgan and Chase said that millionaires don't use astrology, billionaires do. So there is a secret to it. Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes, that's good, yeah.
Yeah, we'll be talking more.
Yeah, right?
Oh, goodness.
I'm down with that. We can do that.
Yeah. Get a better path. Path back to health.
Actually.
Well, that could explain, too, why, the churches really want to keep it to themselves. So.
Oh, yes. Well, if they just hadn't gone and destroyed all of the really old books, the original books, so that we would have even more reference to fall back on, but oh well.
Oh, yeah. What a shame.
Completely.
Well, we can't trust people with knowledge.
You're right.
We can't do that. It'll
No,
get
we
out
cannot.
of hand. They'll
We might
start
have to go back to
thinking.
the aliens for that.
Yes.
Ooh, yeah.
Don't get me. Don't go there now. That takes us a whole other hour of the show.
No, but think about it. They're colonizing Mars. They're doing missions now to they're terraforming Mars. They're taking plants from the Earth, and they're making it so that it's a more suitable environment for humans. If we moved to Mars, we could argue that the astrology there might be a little bit different, and you might find that you're brand new, you're alone there. It's kind of uninhabited. So why not look to the stars for answers?
Right. They've been there
See, Wendy?
forever.
See?
Yeah.
See.
See, Wendy?
Just because I don't quite believe everybody that says they've been abducted, 25 times has been.
Well, I need something to explain my missing time.
Look at that bottle next to you.
After a while, people get tired of that particular excuse.
Well, what I forgot what story was Wendy, the character Wendy, popular in? Was it
Peter Pan.
Peter Pan.
Peter Pan? Okay, so that's
well,
the
and
thing.
Casper also had a witch friend named Wendy.
That's true.
All right, look
Wendy,
at how your name resonates.
And see,
Right.
my name has no connotation whatsoever in pop culture. So, actually, very sad.
I thought your name was described by your disclaimer.
Yes. Actually, I was named after Glenn Campbell, who just passed away. So, Glenn Campbell's middle name was Travis. That's where my name comes from.
Oh.
Which actually is a very. I was gonna. We're running out of time. We'll actually have you back out. Do you ever deal with the people's association of their sign, their chart, and the name that they've been given, and how they live up to the name and the meaning of the name?
I have looked into that, and it is interesting because there is power in names. And you could see how sometimes a person's life could dramatically change once they change their name. Sometimes it could dramatically change as much as when someone changes their hair color, So, yeah, there is, if we look at it and tie it in with numerology, I would never deny the tie-in and the association there.
Makes sense. Something to explore maybe in another episode.
That would be great.
Oh, please, yeah, anytime.
So.
We have each
Well,
other's
thank you so
numbers
much. Yeah, definitely.
And I promise the next time I actually will feel better. I won't mute myself to sneeze and cough, and I'll sound a little bit more
Carry
like
on.
myself, and not so much like some kind of, drunk, stoned muppet whose head sounds like it's in a vice. At least that's how I sound to myself.
Honestly, it sounds great.
When June talks about it, and she gets stopped up a lot, she always says she sounds. I don't remember if it was Quasimodo or the Funhouse monster.
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of how I feel. I just kind of want to take my head off my body and change with anybody. I'll take any other head than the one I've got right now.
Even an orange one.
No,
boy.
we're not. I don't want to be. I do not want to be an Oompa. No, thank you. I'm fine. My hair is much better than his. So.
Yes, it is. Alrighty. Cindy, you want to give your website and other contact information again before we go?
Sure. So
Okay.
I could be reached at. So my website is www.canvas, kansascityastrology.com. It's all one word. And I could be reached at info@kansascityastrology.com. Or you could call me or text me at 816-895-2545.
Fantastic.
So
Thank
I
you
don't
so
need to
much.
be in the same room. I don't have to be, we don't have to be face-to-face. The energy is, the answers is up there in the ethers.
Fantastic. Okay.
Very cool.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed, this discussion with you two, and I really enjoy the chemistry that the two of you have, and really, this is a great chuckle. This was fun.
Thank you very much.
Thank
we
you.
try.
We try. We do like to think so.
Yeah. And well, you've been a great guest too.
Yes, you have.
It's been a lot of fun, informative, very informative. I didn't even get to ask you where all you had studied at, but I saw that somewhere, and then I couldn't find it anymore. And oh shoot.
With astrology, really, and the tarot, a lot of it had to do with a lot of voracious reading and just kind of practicing and applying. I did get some training at the Edgar Cayce Institute in New York City, and I also did take some courses and classes, especially when it came to the ley lines with Kepler College, which used to offer bachelor's degrees in astrology in the United States.
Oh, very
so,
nice.
Yeah, it's a bit of varied, and then my time overseas, and just my experience in Ghana, for instance. Just every little bit it adds. I really wish there was a university that offered these things, in a structured way. As an Earth sign, of course, I'd prefer that. But this would make the world so much of an easier place to live in if we just had that together.
Oh, absolutely. That connection that everybody could tap into.
Right.
Chat room says Edgar Cayce is good.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The sleeping prophet.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and that was a new name for me, so wonderful.
Yes. Actually, wasn't the Edgar Cayce Institute is in Virginia, isn't it? Virginia Beach. Yes, Virginia Beach.
Yes. The headquarters.
Headquarters. Yes. Yes.
Alrighty. Well, hey, we're going to be back Sunday morning, actually. Morning in Kansas City, anyway.
Midday for me.
True. Yes.
Still too early on a Sunday. I only sleep 2 days a week. I only get to sleep 2 days a week.
You'll be fine. But we'll have Richard Estep and Vanessa Mitchell. Vanessa owns it's a very historic old prison called the Cage, and it's where back in the day when the witches were persecuted. It's in England. It's St. Osyth. That's where they held all of the accused witches, and then put them through their trials, which is just basically kill them. And she had quite the haunting, and Richard and Vanessa have gotten together and written a book about it. And it's a really good book.
It really is. Very interesting. But every time that I was reading the name of the city, which I'm not exactly sure if it's pronounced St. Osiph or St. Osiph, but
right,
all I could hear was the Golden Girls and St. Olaf, which is where Betty White's character was from in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
That's all I could hear in my head every time that I was reading it.
But anyway, we're looking forward to that. Hope everyone can join us for that. And
yes, that's at noon Eastern, right?
Right. Yes.
Okay. Please don't
Central.
Please don't make it any earlier.
Well, but it's 5:00 over in England, so we were compromising.
Oh, so that mean, are we having tea?
Why not? I'll even send you some Scooby snacks.
I need them. So yeah, join us Sunday for Richard Estep and Vanessa Mitchell on Spirits of the Cage. And actually, I think we're going to have some fun and play some EVPs.
Yes,
that they captured.
We've got the one
that
from
they captured.
The bathroom, and it was broadcast on, I believe it was British Ghosts or famous British Hauntings or something like that. And it's really intense, kind of. So
Yeah.
anyway, it'll be
So we're
fun.
looking forward to that,
Absolutely.
and looking forward to having you back on, Cindy. We would love
Yes.
to kind of continue the dialogue, talking about numerology, names, charts. After Wendy and I have you chart us, then we can come back on and discuss what you find out about us.
Yeah, and you know what? If you could email me your chart information, your birth information, so it requires, your birth location, in other words, the city, state, country of your birth, the date of your birth, and the exact time. And if you don't have it, you could get it off of your long-form birth certificate,
Which I have.
or sometimes people have it in their baby books.
Yes.
Or ask your mom.
Yeah.
True.
Well,
No,
If they're
moms
around
tend to
to
get
ask.
foggy after a few decades, so.
True.
Yeah.
but I was the firstborn. She still remembers it down. She knows what time I was born.
Right. Yep.
She occasionally will call me at that moment, that hour on my birthday. I'm like, Mom,
no.
seriously?
Wow.
Stop. Sometimes I'm busy. Not always. Sometimes.
Very neat.
But yes,
I look forward to coming back. I would really
Yes.
enjoy it, and let's
Great.
delve a bit deeper into this discussion.
sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Yep.
All right.
And,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we'll talk
Thank you.
and we'll get you rescheduled. And been a great show. I believe I'll take us out with it's the Reverend Jimmy Bratcher. He's actually out of St. Joseph, and his song is Jupiter and Mars.
Ah, cool.
Yeah.
Good choice. You're so good at programming.
Oh yeah. But unfortunately, unless you listen to the show afterwards, you won't be able to hear it.
Yeah, we can't hear it. We can't hear it. So
Yeah, I haven't figured out
Right.
that one yet, so sorry about
stupid
that.
speaker.
Ah, well. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you all so much.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Blinding light, a flash of chrome, hot-head blonde in a tricked out Ford, red round the lights, red on the hood, red tail lights. She stepped out the door. She was dressed to dine with a devil smile. She said, hey, hey, baby, can we talk for a while? She said, I'll give you sun and stars. Said, I'll give to you Jupiter and Mars. Like mixing whiskey and gasoline. She had a voodoo spirit and a heart gone wild. I saw that fire down in her eyes. She said, I'll give you sun and stars. Said I'll give to you Jupiter and Mars. I heard that change. It's time to stand up and not be blamed. She said, I'll give you sun and stars. Say I'll give to you Jupiter and Mars.
Jupiter and Mars by the Reverend Jimmy Bratcher, the singer out of St. Joseph, Missouri, as a matter of fact. Quite good. All right. Good night, everybody.
Thank you for joining us tonight. You've been listening to Mystic Moon Cafe. Join us every Wednesday from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. On behalf of Wendy Schindler, this is Travis Short saying have a great rest of your week.